Hi.
Hi,
How are you?
good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm also great. I guess it's been centuries since we met, isn't it?
It's been a while. It seems like it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I welcome you with all my heart for this discussion. And as you know that today we are going to discuss about modal verbs, English modal verbs.
Yes.
Also, it is well known to say auxiliary verb, if I'm not wrong, auxiliary verb.
Yes, there is a difference between, say, auxiliary verb and modal verb. And modal verb is a type of auxiliary verb. And yes, so
Okay.
if you want to, I can clarify a little bit, at least attempt to clarify. And if you take a helping verb, maybe the most common one, or auxiliary verb, helping verb, same thing, right? That would be the verb to be,
To
all
be.
right? To
Okay.
be. That doesn't work by itself. It needs another verb to be what, right? And the verb to be is different than, say, a helping verb because let's say you look at a verb like could, okay? The helping verb could. And to use that as an example, to be has an infinitive form. So that's why it has a to form, right? To be. You don't say to could. And then could doesn't change. To be changes depending on what you're saying and who you're talking about, right? You can conjugate the verb to be, I am, you are, he is, etc. Could never changes no matter what subject you're using or anything. It's always the same. But it's the other verb that follows it that will determine if we're talking about the present, past, or future, right? And if a verb has an infinitive or a to form, like to be, to have, it's not a modal verb. Modal verbs do not have an infinitive.
Okay.
And they mean absolutely nothing if you don't have the other verb along with it, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a helping verb and it doesn't work by itself.
Okay. All right. Yeah, as I know that helping verbs are like is, am, are, were, was.
Yeah,
These
that's
are
the
like,
verb. That's the different forms of the verb to be.
yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying the verb to be changes, right, depending on the subject. And the verb, say, should doesn't change. It's always should. Okay.
Hmm.
Present, past, perfect, anything else, it's always should.
Remains same.
It means the same. But being a being a modal verb, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely needs the complementary information. It means nothing if you just say should. Should what? Right?
Yeah, we need the full sentence. There is no denying. Yeah. So, what the confusion we have, like most Indians have this confusion. Like we know the all uses of different modal verbs like can, could, may, might, will, would. When we
Yes.
learn separately, okay, there are different uses, but we get confused when we see sentences. One sentence uses with all modal verbs like we can say that it would rain tomorrow.
Okay.
Similarly, I have seen it is written like it will rain tomorrow, it could rain tomorrow, it may rain
Mhm.
tomorrow. So what
Right.
I want you to describe is like uh, what does the speaker want to say when speak?
Okay. Now, if you want to, I will back up a little bit and I will tell you why I think it can be confusing as
Yes.
well. Like you might hear someone say in a conversation, you should, right? They're talking and then he says, you should. You're thinking, okay, that's a modal verb that's not supposed to work by itself. why is he saying you should? Well,
Hmm.
it's because they already know what they're talking about. Let's say someone's asking you, should I have breakfast? You can just say you should, right?
Yes. Yes.
And but we already know what we're talking about. You're really giving them a shortened version of the complete sentence, which would be yes, you should have breakfast. But if I was an English learner, right,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
just hear you should, I'm thinking, okay, this is very confusing, right? Because modal verbs are supposed to have another verb in front of
Yes.
them.
Exactly.
And so sometimes if someone uses it like that just by itself, it's because we already understand the context, right?
Correct.
You don't
Correct.
just walk up to your friend, you haven't even said hello, and you say you should. They don't know what you're talking about, right?
Correct.
And okay, but at the same time, Megha, it
Hmm.
can be confusing, I will grant you, because
Hmm.
could and would, okay, are very similar. And I think it's
Exactly.
practical. Could and would. Okay, it could rain tomorrow.
Hmm.
Okay, in that context, I think a better example would be it could rain tomorrow. It might rain tomorrow. It really
Hmm.
means the same thing, right?
Yes.
It means the
Yes.
same. So it just pretty much is interchangeable in that context. Now, would is you say it would rain tomorrow, that's conditional. It would rain tomorrow if the weather forecast is correct. Okay, that's conditional. And so modal verbs can frequently be used in a conditional sense as well. Okay, but you can also say it should rain tomorrow if the weather forecast is correct. So it some of these can be used like there's a saying that they use in the United States sometimes. Okay, six of one, half dozen of the other. It's the same thing, right? And so, really, a lot of times it depends on who's speaking and what they say. Like, it would rain tomorrow. That is conditional for sure. It has to be.
Hmm.
It would rain if it gets cloudy, right? You can say it can rain tomorrow. You're saying it might. The same thing. It might rain. It can rain. That's very similar. And it may rain tomorrow. You're
Hmm.
saying the same thing. It might rain. But they can be conditional too. It can rain tomorrow if the weather forecast is correct. It could rain tomorrow, and the same way if the weather forecast is correct. You could use it the same way with may, but when you use would, it would rain tomorrow. That has to be conditional. You can't just say it would rain tomorrow by itself.
All right.
Then you need to say if something, right?
If clause should be there.
If my if my mother is correct, it will rain tomorrow. It would rain tomorrow. But it I can understand the confusion because you can use modal verbs. It, I mean, sometimes it's pick and choose which one you want. All right,
Correct. Yes.
because
Yes.
it probably just depends on the speaker. And there's a slight difference in meaning between would, can, may, might. But sometimes, like I said, it's six of one, half dozen of the other. It many times will mean pretty much the same thing, right? Depending on what you're saying.
Yes, I brought this question because my audience, my viewers keep asking me the same question like, ma'am, can we use would and could interchangeably? And are they interchangeable? So I went through some articles and then I
Mhm.
came to know that it completely depends on the speaker, uh, how and in which context the speaker wants to say. And like another question is, even in newspaper, when we read newspaper, in some articles there is written like it would rain or it would something, and there is no
Hmm.
context. They just write this one sentence, and then we get confused. Where is the if clause in the newspaper? Then
Exactly.
viewers come
Yeah.
to me and they ask me, ma'am, there is no if clause, and we have learned that we are supposed to use if clause when we use would. So how it happens? So they get confused. So
Yes,
it
I
is
understand.
if there is no written like it would rain tomorrow, and there is no if clause, so it is like we should understand in this way, or it is understood there.
Well, I think that what you're describing to me sounds like a grammatical error on the part of someone. I would probably need to look at it more closely, but it if it's conditional, all right, if you're looking at the modal verb would, okay, then you just don't use it by itself like that. It would rain tomorrow, okay? I look, you can say, for instance, I would be happy, okay?
Yes,
You
I
really,
would be happy.
that's an incomplete statement.
Yes, it
What
would
would
work.
make you happy?
It would work.
Okay,
That what?
yes. So if this happens, it would make me happy, or I would be happy. But that we need to know what, if we
What?
are to understand what you're saying, what would make you happy. You don't just say would it would make, okay, something would make me happy, or you don't just say, for instance, would make me happy
Hmm.
and expect us to understand what you're talking about, because we don't have all the information, right? Like you say, the if clause would
Yes.
perfectly clarify things. And so, yes, I can definitely see the confusion. And then if we're looking at helping verbs, like we mentioned the verb to be, right?
Hmm.
The verb to be is a helping verb. Modal verbs are helping verbs, okay? But they are
Yes.
so different than the verb to be, or the verb to have, which is another helping verb, okay? I have decided to have coffee with my breakfast, for instance, okay? The verb to have is a helping verb in that sense, but it is very different than modal verbs, which are also helping verbs,
Correct.
because the modal verbs do not have the to form or the infinitive, but I assure you, Megha, just to clarify this, okay? Native speakers sometimes may have a difficult time explaining modal verbs,
Okay.
because I think it gets to where the language is natural because it's your first language, right? Okay,
Yes.
I think if you tell the average American, explain modal verbs to me, they might be like a
Yes.
question mark on top of their head. What?
No, we have confusion like if may and might both
Okay.
work similarly, both work same.
Yeah.
So why do we have these two words? We
Mhm.
can
Okay.
like
Yes. May and might, correct. That's very similar. Okay.
may and might, they are
It,
quite
it's, it,
similar.
it means this, to me, it means the same thing. But sometimes the word may is a little bit more polite.
Yes.
And so you say, may I, right? If you're talking to your teacher and you want to be nice, may I step outside the classroom for 1 minute, please? May I? Okay. And a lot of times that a child, when they're being respectful to their mother, okay, if they're doing things right, they say, may I? Mother, may I go play? Whatever that they want to do, right? So may I is many times more polite, okay? And but it's the same thing. It's the same thing, you know. May I? And uh, could I? Should I? Very similar,
Could
okay?
I, and could and between could and should, there is a clear difference that should ask about obligation. Yes. duties,
Yes.
right? And when we want to use could, we show our politeness, or we are less certain about something. Weak
Yes.
possibility. There is a weak possibility, then only we can use could or may and even might as well. But if I want to differentiate between may and might, so might
Mhm.
is a bit more, possible. And
Yeah.
when I use might, so it is less possible for something. I understand
Yeah.
by this, if I am not wrong.
Yeah. May I and can also be used interchangeably with can I. Like if you're talking about getting permission from your boss or from your a parent, right? May I do this? Can I do this? And okay, if you use the word should, okay, I think my mom once warned me about something. Okay, she says be very careful how you use the word should. It can be offensive, right? Because depending on who you're talking to and how you're talking, and if you say if you if you know that your friend, okay, is doing something wrong and you want to try to make them aware of it, right? Like let's say they're eating something that's not healthy
Hmm.
and you say you should not do that. That sounds like an accusation, right? The word should can sound like an accusation sometimes.
Yes.
You should not do that. You should not do this. You should do this. You should have less sugar. You should have more of this kind of vegetable if you're eating. If you're concerned about your health, you should do what I tell you to do. That's kind of what it sounds like. And so if you want to be a little more concerned about how you come across, maybe a little less offensive, then you instead of using should, which makes you sound kind of bossy, all right, you explain it differently. Okay, if
Right.
if you would make this change, all right, it might be healthier for you, for instance, right? And so we need to be a little bit careful with the word should because it can sometimes sound a little too authoritarian, right? And but anyway, uh, sometimes it's perfectly fine to use it. All these things I think Megha
Mhm.
people will pick up when they practice conversation. A lot of things I think start to come a little more naturally, right? And but it's still good to understand grammar. I think it's something that we need to do from time to time. And I think it's good to understand modal verbs, but it will become more natural after some use and some practice, right?